Hey guys, Coach Weston here with Good Lift Performance. Welcome back to the channel. We got video number 2 here. Thank you for everyone who checked out my first video on progressing programming from the novice to the advanced stages. I really appreciate everyone who watched that and also took the time to leave a comment or let me know they watched it. We got great feedback on the first one, so I'm really excited to continue diving into more powerlifting topics. Make sure you subscribe so that you can catch all my videos. I plan on dropping at least one video per week going in depth on a powerlifting topic. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and then let me know in the comments what you want to see in the future. I have a few videos coming up planned, but let me know what you guys want to see. In today's video, we're gonna take a step back. So last week's video was sort of a bird's eye view of my programming philosophy, and now we're going to go into how we're going to actually set that up for an athlete. So the first part of when you're setting up a program for an athlete is setting up the split. The split is the foundation of the athlete's program. If your training split or your training week, also known as a microcycle, if your training week isn't cohesive, if it's not working, then the whole program's not going to work. We need to make sure we have a solid week of training before we can have a solid month of training, and then 3 months of training, and then 6 months of training, right? It all starts with getting a good week of training down. And so focusing on developing a good split is going to be very important so that we can get a good week of training in. Once we can get that flow down of, okay, we know what days we can train, we know we have a good flow down, then we can start building momentum with the athlete. We can start gaining progress. And then once that progress comes, then that's when we can start hitting those PRs. So we got to first set the flow. The first thing we're going to think about when we are setting up the split is we're going to look at our athletes' availability. Pretty straightforward, right? What days can they actually train? That's going to be the most important part. So like one, how many days a week can they train? Also, what days of the week can they train? That's going to be very, very important. Because even though, let's say they can train 4 days a week, that might be a different programming consideration if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or if that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, or maybe that's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. There's lots of different makeups of that could work. So once we know how many days a week the athlete can train and which days they can train on, then we can start looking at filling in those days with the training. So we want to look at our SBD frequency, our squat, bench, and deadlift frequency. We need to decide how many times a week do we need to do each lift. Now, if you are a new athlete, during our consultation call, I'm going to go over that. Like, what have you done with your previous training? What has worked? What hasn't worked? And that's how we're going to set that baseline. So, a good rule of thumb is for squats, you're looking at 2 to 3 times a week. Most athletes need more than 1 time a week, and very few, almost no athletes need more than 3 times a week. Squatting more than 3 times a week is getting a little more excessive, and so usually we can find a good range in that 2 to 3. Normally most athletes just need twice a week squatting, and then we can manipulate variables within that to make progress. More advanced athletes might need that 3rd time a week, but even then the 3rd time is mostly a easy session anyway. So 2 to 3 times a week, for most people it's trying to be twice a week. For bench press is the one that loves frequency. So most athletes are going to need at least 3 times a week benching. For your heavier weight athletes, they might benefit more from twice a week benching, but most part you're going to start with 3 times a week, and then 3 to 4 is pretty common. Up more than 4 starts getting more into, all right, you're probably more of an advanced lifter and you need that higher frequency to get in the volume, but that's going to be later on down the stage. So for most of you who are probably watching my channel, you're probably more in the novice intermediate stage, so probably that 3 to 4 range is going to be right where you need to be. A lot of times with athletes, I like to start them at 3 times a week. If they've only been benching twice, I'll usually just bump them right up to 3. If they're already at 3, we'll stick with 3 and then try to make some qualitative changes there with volume and intensity. But I don't usually like to bump them right up to 4 times a week right off the bat. We want to try to get the most out of we can with, say, 3 times a week before bumping them up to 4 times a week. And then deadlift's going to range from 1 to 2 times per week. Usually, depending on the athlete, like conventional is generally responds better to one time a week often, versus sumo will respond a lot better to twice a week. But also depends on the lifter and the leverages. So anywhere in that range, like really 1 to 2. Generally, I like to bias towards one time a week initially, and then once we see that we need to do more, then we can go up to twice a week. But generally, it's going to be anywhere in that range, but I like to start off with one time a week. So now we have decided, all right, which days of the week we are going to train. We've decided, all right, how many days a week we need to do each lift. And so now we need to sort of plug and play those slots into the week. So we're going to set up, all right, what days of the week we can train, and we're going to start plugging and play those exercises into those days. And so when we have, say, squatting twice a week, benching 3 times a week, deadlifting once a week, you're going to have a primary squat and then a secondary squat. You have 2 squat slots, primary, secondary. For bench press, you're going to have, primary, secondary, and a tertiary. And so what I mean by that is primary is just the day that usually we're going the heaviest out of out of all the training days for that lift, or it's the one where we're expecting a performance or a good performance, or we're using that session as our performance indicator of, all right, we're setting up the training so that on the primary day for that lift, we are expecting you to feel the best. And so we're going to probably have some type of heavy top set, and we're going to use that as our performance indicator to track progress. So to see, all right, are the variables set up to make progress or not? Are we not making progress? And so, as assigning which days of the week we're going to be doing squat, bench, or deadlift, we need to understand, all right, how can I manipulate these so that on my primary squat day, I feel the best, or my squat feels good. You don't want to have it set up where, let's say, you have your primary deadlift and then you have your primary squat the very next day, because you're probably not going to feel super great after doing heavy deadlifts going into your heavy squat session, right? So we need to make sure that we assign the week or schedule the week so that you feel good on your primary day so that you can perform well in the gym, and we can use that as your performance indicator to judge your progress. And so I'll go into some example training splits of common training splits that I use with my athletes and how and why we implement those. So here we have some example training splits that I'm going to go over and kind of walk you through why we set it up this way and how you can adjust this for yourself. So in this first example, this is a 3-day split. So a common one would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Normally with a 3-day split, you're going to want to separate each day with a recovery day with 24 hours or 48 hours, I should say, because most of your 3-day splits are going to be full body sessions. And so you want to give yourself that extra recovery, as well as to split out the training stress. It's not very effective if you have, say 2 days back to back, you have a 1-day rest, and then you have your next training day, and then you have 3 days of rest. Obviously, like if that's the only thing that will work for you or with your schedule, then you got to do what you got to do, right? But realistically, we want to have it spread out so that's evenly spaced. So now it's only 2 days of rest between day 3, and then when you circle back to day 1 for your next week of training. So with the 3-day split, assuming we're squatting twice a week, you're probably going to want to spread those out Monday and Friday, or your day 1 and day 3. So, you can with the primary or the secondary, depending on when you feel better, you can switch those around. So if you would think, all right, coming off of the weekend, I have 2 days of rest. I'm going to come in feeling really fresh on Monday. So that's when I'm going to do my primary squats. That's why the primary squat is in that day 1 section. And that's usually what I see for my athletes who are on a 3-day split, that the day 1 is the better day for your primary squat. You can technically also just skip ahead to bench. So you see down here that primary bench is towards the end of the week on Friday. And so theoretically, when we are also setting up the training split here, we want to consider, all right, how would this look tapering into a meet? And so with bench press, or with competitions, you're going to be most of the time you're going to be competing on the weekend, either Saturday or Sunday. So having your bench be having the training set up to have your bench be the strongest towards the end of the week makes peaking for competition a lot easier, because then you can just kind of train into the meet versus with your bench. You don't have to taper as much versus if you have your training set up to have your strongest bench on Monday, you kind of have to now maintain that fitness through the whole week while also trying to taper, and that can get a little bit more complicated. Not impossible, it's totally doable, but it does make it slightly more complicated. So if we can, let's try to set the bench up to have your primary bench be on that day 3 slot. So and I find that bench is probably the most adjustable one, where you can really play with those variables to kind of peak bench when you want it to peak. So we have secondary bench here on Monday. This is probably going to be some type of volume bench. You're going to be hitting a lot of your rep work here. Your middle of the week bench is probably going to be some easy light recovery bench, maybe a variation, maybe some technique work, something that's going to easier to recover from, that's going to set you up to feel strong on your day 3. As well as, with a 3-day split, with this setup, you have one primary lift per day, so that kind of helps spread out the stress throughout the week. If you have, let's say, your secondary squat and your secondary bench both on Friday, that can put a lot of stress on Monday, and so this just kind of helps even that out a little bit. Wednesday being the middle day with primary deadlift, you do have a day off in between your primary squat and primary deadlift, so that little bit of recovery really will help. And then you also have a day off before your secondary squat, which is probably your volume squat. So generally you want to try to save a lot of your, it depends on how you recover. So if your deadlift really gets fatigued from a lot of leg work, you might not want to overdo the leg work here on the secondary bench. On this Monday, you might want to do a lot of like upper body volume, so that you're not going to need to hit your primary bench till this day. So you can do a lot of like push volume here, and then that can kind of the fatigue can slowly die off until you get to Friday, and then you might feel really strong on that day. Versus if you do a lot of lower body stuff here, like a lot of leg stuff, you might be really fatigued coming into deadlift here. So generally how I would set this up is, all right, Monday might be a lot of push volume for upper body. Wednesday might be, you hit your deadlift and then do some pull volume here. And then Friday, you hit your secondary squat, your rep work, and you're going to be sore here, so might as well just hit some leg volume here, your quad, your leg press, your belt squat, stuff like that, and then you have the whole weekend to recover before you get back to your primary squat. So that's kind of in general how I'd set up accessories with that too. Now you can always adjust that depending on what's going to be the best for you, but that's kind of like a general split there for a 3-day a week program. So for most people who are going to be on a 3-day, it's mostly due to time constraints. Most people can recover from 4, assuming they have the availability in their schedule, they can recover from a 4-day split. So most of the time a 3-day split is due to time constraints. So let's go to a 4-day split here. So I guess it's going to be similar volume to the 3-day split, but now we're just spreading it out. So now we can spread it out to, we have our secondary squat here on Monday and our secondary bench here too. So we are changing some stuff around here. So kind of hitting your volume stuff here, and then now we're going to be having your, I spelled that wrong. How embarrassing. Okay, so we're having our secondary squat and bench here, kind of our volume day here, and then we have our intensity days here on the back end, or our primary days with squat and bench. So same kind of thing here with bench press. If we can, let's try to have bench peak towards the end of the week. Squat is similar to that, where squat has more of a middle recovery pace in terms of tapering. So best bet is to have deadlift towards the beginning of the week, because that's usually the longest taper length, and then your squat towards the middle of the week, and then bench towards the end of the week. And that's a great way to taper that off. So that's kind of how I have this set up, but if you are someone who responds better, you could always flip the secondary and the primary day around. That totally works too. Sometimes I find that if you go really heavy on squat and then you have to try to go really heavy on deadlift the next day, the nervous system fatigue is a lot there, versus with secondary squat, it's more volume than it is intensity at that point, usually. So while you might be a little sore, your nervous system isn't too fatigued. And I know that's not the correct way to phrase that, right? But in terms of just like how you feel fatigue-wise, you're not going to feel as tired coming into that Tuesday if it's not a super heavy, neurologically demanding squat session. Versus say you do that on deadlift, your primary day here on Tuesday, you can have Wednesday as a rest day, and then now Thursday is your primary squat, so you have a day of rest in between that, and so you should feel a little bit more fresh here coming into squat. And then if going to a 4-day split, if we need to add a secondary deadlift day, we can do this on the back end of your bench press here. You can also put it on this deadlift day here as well. I find that's a little bit less effective because now we're only having 1 day of rest in between primary and secondary deadlift, versus now we get that 2-day rest here between these two. And then also we can still put primary bench in front of our secondary deadlifts to give that bench its priority within the session. And so with this type of split, you'll notice that we're really emphasizing recovery here. We want to try to spread out the stress more evenly as much as we can, so that each day is not one, so that we don't have days that are particularly harder than the rest of the week. Now, if you look at this, Monday probably looks like the hardest day of the week, right? Where you have, volume squat and volume bench, which it very might well be, but then it's not going to be where the rest, any of these other days are significantly easier, right? So we want to try to spread that out as much as possible, versus putting all of your primary days really close together and then trying to have you really have high output all within a 1 to 2 day span. I generally find it's better to have it more spread out and give each day its priority within the week, and that usually leads to better results because we're able to get better recovery and give better output on those sessions. Let's go to a 5-day split here. So generally, if we're going from a 4-day to a 5-day split, it's generally because we need more recovery. Or another common one is for bench press. Let's say in the 4-day split example, squats might really beat up if you're a low bar squatter and it really beats up your elbows going to bench, and it starts to really affect your bench. We want to probably prioritize bench during the week. And so a 5-day split often is what I'll use to prioritize bench, but then still continue to spread everything out during the week. You can do that within a 4-day split for sure, but 5-day also works really well for that too. As well as for athletes who maybe don't respond as well to having like a lower and an upper body, or like a lower body exercise multiple days per week, we might need to condense that into just a couple days. So a lot of times with a 5-day split, I'm condensing it to just 2 lower body days. So you see here a primary squat and a secondary deadlift, followed by a primary deadlift and a secondary squat here on these 2 days. So oftentimes we're trying to condense the lower body stress to just 2 days, and we're also trying to prioritize bench, your primary bench, in the week, so that you can hit this first, and then you get your primary bench done before you have to go in and squat to kind of save your elbows. And generally when I do a split like this, you'll see that it goes primary, secondary, tertiary. Normally your elbows get more fatigued as the week goes on, so we kind of just descend in order of importance. So by that time you get to here, the Saturday session is a little bit more easier, and in terms of the difficulty and also just like the mental focus, where also, if Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's 3 days in a row. So you could switch secondary and tertiary bench here if that's going to set you up for a better primary day here. But I often find by the time we get to Saturday, you're also like more mentally fatigued here. So it's easier to come in on Saturday and just hit an easier tertiary bench session. This is usually just all upper body accessories. A lot of times this is where I put in the shoulder accessories. So overhead press, lateral raise, rear delt raise, face pulls, some extra tricep push downs, maybe some lat pull down. Really easy upper body day to kind of round out the accessories, and then get you back up to get you feeling recovered and fresh, so that you have the 1 day off and then you get back to the primary day on Monday. So that's usually why I would use a 5-day split, is to kind of spread out recovery a little bit more, as well as condense the lower body stress, and then prioritize bench during the week. And then the last one here, the 6-day split. So I call this one the Powerlifters push-pull legs. And so this is generally for someone who really wants to train a lot, loves being in the gym. Usually they're going to be a younger athlete that has more free time on their hands. And so with this split, we're going to be able to, it's the same frequency as all the other lifts or other splits, but we're spreading out over 6 days. And so what this allows us to do, is allows us to hit a lot of accessories. And so this is great for use more of your like power builder split, where you have primary squat, primary bench, primary deadlift, tertiary bench, secondary squat, and then secondary bench. So it's all very, very split out, right? It's that gives you a lot, you only have one big lift to focus on, and it gives you a lot of room for accessories because you're not going to be super fatigued after just doing one big lift for the most part. So this really spreading it out allows you to hit a lot of accessories, as well as just basically hit a lot of accessories, get more training volume in. It is the least flexible of all the splits, right? Because it's 6 days out of your 7-day week. So if you miss a session, it's really hard to manipulate this around, and then you start running into, well, now you're training like with Sunday. That's gonna be, I guess I forgot to put the days here, but assuming you're gonna be Monday through Saturday here, and so you're gonna have Sunday as your rest day, right? Well, if you have to miss a day in the middle of the week and you have to push that back, well, now it's, all right, you have 3 days in a row, maybe off, and now you are going to have multiple days in a row, like more like 7 or 8 leading into the next week. And so, or more like 8 to 9, I guess. And so that can be really difficult too, in terms of it's not very flexible. So the pros is you can hit a lot more accessories, right? And you get a lot more volume in, but it's a lot less flexible. So it does have its pros and cons. Normally for powerlifters, I'm going to be urging for a 4-day split. This allows for a lot of flexibility in the split, where you can have it on multiple different days. Even if something comes up, you can manipulate the days around to still get all of your training in. It also allows for a lot of some recovery days where you can focus on other things other than powerlifting. And whether you're a student, have a lot of homework, or you just have other hobbies, it allows you to focus on your other hobbies during those days, because generally powerlifting is going to take up a lot of time, 2 to 3 hours in the gym. And so you want to, and so it's harder to do other things on those days. And so it's having those extra recovery days, rest days, it makes it easier to be more flexible and allows you to have other pursuits and stuff like that. It's easier to fit those in, right? So these are the most common splits that I use. There's a lot more variation within the 4-day split, but one of the big things I wanted to drive home here is that if you notice across the splits, the big thing is recovery. We're trying to spread out the training stress as much as possible and not just condense it into a couple days. There's another common split where it'd be, day 1, primary squat, primary bench, and then day 2 is primary deadlift, and then it kind of just descends from there. You could flop that too, so where it's all secondary stuff on the front end and then primary stuff on the back end, to where it's all kind of condensed into 1 to 2 days. I personally have found that doesn't work as well, because it kind of lopsides the training split to where one side of the week is really hard and the other side of the week isn't as hard. And I want to try to spread that out so that we can put more energy and more focus into each session. Versus if you have like a really hard front half of the week, it almost kind of burns you out a little bit. And when you get to the second half of the week, you're like, well, I don't have anything heavy here. I don't have anything like really mentally demanding, so I can kind of just chill and sandbag the rest of the week. And so it kind of just creates a not great mental environment, as well as recovery wise. It kind of is wonky with how you recover. So I personally find trying to spread out those training days as much as possible really good. As well as there was no SBD days here in the program or any of these splits. So normally I'm not a big SBD fan. Now it's funny I say that because I currently do SBD sessions, but my split's a little bit weird. My only caveat for SBD days is that you don't have the ability to really add in a ton of accessories on SBD day, or because it's generally going to be pretty time demanding and mentally fatiguing to get through all 3 lists in one day. And so especially for the novice to intermediate lifter, we're better spent spreading that training out and hitting more accessories than we are the specificity of hitting all those lifts in one day. Now, if you're a really advanced lifter, especially ones that lift in prime time sessions, or sessions that are going to be 2.5, 3 hours long, then having SBD days to build that conditioning to go from squat to bench to deadlift and be recovered is very important, right? And so for those athletes, the SBD sessions are great. For your more average novice to intermediate lifter who just competes at locals and that wants to try to go for regionals and the nationals, you probably don't need SBD days, and you'll probably be better off spreading it out more and doing more accessories. So those are kind of my thoughts there on balancing out the training stress and also SBD days. So it wasn't until I started editing this video that I realized that I forgot to record an outro. So for all of you who made it to this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and then in the comments, drop a hashtag uplift to let me know that you made it this far. And make sure, you subscribe for weekly powerlifting content. I'll make sure to catch you guys in the next one. Peace.